Hi, welcome to Writing with Steve, with me, Steve Evans. Today we're continuing with our series of videos, all aimed at getting you published, about completing your story and then going through the publishing process. If you haven't done so already, please check out our early videos in this series. In this video, we're looking at your story structure and we're looking at the typical characters to include. We'll also be looking at some of the books that have helped me with my writing. I'm also including examples from books, plays and films because they all follow the same basic structure. Let's see your story as a journey, and your protagonist is engaged in taking this journey. And if you are wondering why I'm using the term protagonist instead of hero, please check out our earlier video. Your story structure is called a narrative. That is the order in which your story is told. It also includes from whose point of view the story is told. A typical story structure or narrative is chronological. That means it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Some narratives may begin in the middle of the story and then move backwards. We call this media res, in the middle of things, but typically most stories take a chronological approach. In the chronological narrative, events are sequenced in terms of causes and effects. This means that your protagonist begins their journey, they wish to fulfill a wish or desire and encounter obstacles. They react to these obstacles and so forth until the conclusion of the story. The chronological narrative we can divide into 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the beginning of your narrative is the beginning of the story, and it's also called the call to action. The call to action at the start of the story is the thing that motivates or forces your protagonist to leave their routine and set out on their journey. So what prompts them to start this journey? This might be a desire to fulfill, to achieve something. Equally, it might be prompted by something totally outside their control. In Educating Rita, the play and the film, Rita's call to action was her dream to study at university. In Robert Harris's book Pompeii, it was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that brings about the situation and call for action. The antagonist is a person or a thing that is preventing the protagonist from achieving their goals. Regarding an antagonist as a person, that would include Blofeld in the James Bond series, Professor Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes series of books, Lord of the Rings. Probably there's a whole queue of antagonists all queuing up there. So we'd have Gollum, Sauron, just to name 2. As I mentioned in the novel Pompeii, it is Mount Vesuvius that is preventing Marcus, who's the protagonist in the story, from fleeing the city and also rescuing people. The antagonist can also include an illness or a disease that the protagonist has to battle and try to overcome. It can also be our own insecurities that we have to overcome and battle with. Sometimes we are our worst enemies. In Educating Rita, it was the attitudes of Rita's husband and her family that served as the antagonist. Her husband believed that going to university was a complete waste of time for a working class married woman and a hairdresser, where her family were pressuring her throughout the play to start a family. The antagonist must be as powerful, if not more powerful, than the protagonist, or there'll be absolutely no challenge to them and nothing major for them to overcome, and your readers will feel shortchanged. The conflict between the protagonist, who set out to achieve their goals, and the antagonist, who's trying to prevent them and block them from achieving these goals, these oppositions, the clash of them, creates tension, and it creates conflict, and it creates great drama. These are also opportunities for your readers to make an emotional connection with your protagonist. This is the moment that they're going to invest their time, and this is what is going to keep them reading your story. These tensions help your readers connect with your protagonist and other characters on an emotional level. And this is really important because readers are making an emotional investment. They usually connect with characters on an emotional level. And through this, they're going to A, empathise with your character, B, want them to succeed in their quest, and C, investing all that time makes readers want to keep reading your work. And as the Lord of the Rings demonstrates, it doesn't have to be one antagonist. It could be a whole succession of antagonists. For example, one of the oldest stories written in English, Beowulf, pits the protagonist, Beowulf, against a hideous monster called Grendel. But once Beowulf has fought and defeated Grendel, who comes along but Grendel's mother, seeking revenge, and she is meaner and nastier and tougher than her son. Beowulf once again must have to figure out how to overcome the monster. Okay, brief recap. Ask yourself, what does your character want to achieve? What motivates them to leave their routine and follow their call to action? The conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist causes tension and causes drama. This will help your readers connect with the story and with your protagonist at an emotional level. And this is what you need and seek to achieve. When we think about antagonists, we often think that these are huge obstacles. But we can also include smaller antagonists and tensions throughout the story. This is essential to retain the interest of your readers. So pepper your story throughout with opportunities for tensions and opposites to occur, because opposites, of course, the clash of opposites are creating the tension and the drama you're seeking to include in your story. So for example, think of some of the opportunities for tensions to develop small scale situations which are hotbeds for tension and for arguments to develop. How about Christmas time and the annual journey to the in-laws for Christmas dinner? Or it could be the jury who are undecided whether the defendant is guilty or innocent. These are great situations to base the conflict and add these into your main story. Go and examine some books and ask yourself, what are the major tensions and conflicts in the story? In Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, which is set in the reign of Henry VIII, Thomas Cromwell, the protagonist, is under constant pressure to secure a divorce for Henry of his first wife so he can marry Anne Boleyn. The stakes are really high because Thomas knows that his failure could lead to him losing the king's favour and likely losing his head. Stage 2 is where the complications develop in your story. This is where the hero or the protagonist is confronted by row upon row of antagonists, large or small, and must figure out ways to overcome these. And you may ask, Steve, you've just mentioned the word hero, but you said use the word protagonist. And in this case, you are right, because the word hero is something I tend to say, let's look at protagonist instead. However, when we're looking at character types and looking at story structure, there is a specific use for the word hero. And this is because many academics, many scriptwriters and storytellers, when examining narratives from centuries ago or even from the time of the very first stories, for example, myths, legends and folk stories, have identified certain characters, archetypes and certain story structures. So in this very niche and narrow sense, it is sometimes useful as a writer to look at the journey as a hero's journey. Some of these plots include rags to riches, overcoming the monster and transformation, and we'll be looking at some of these main plots in a later video. Stage 2 usually ends when events reach a conclusion. This is the climax of your story, when events reach boiling point and can no longer be contained. This is the moment that something gives. For example, Frodo reaches the volcano and disposes of the ring. It's a critical moment in the story. In Wolf Hall, Henry divorces Catherine, his first wife, and marries Anne Boleyn. Stage 3 of your story includes its conclusion. This is where the threads of the story are tied together or come together in what we call the denouement. In the denouement, you need to include the following. Show how your character has developed and changed on the course of the journey. Has their personality changed, or do they hold a different outlook on life? The story needs closure, but this doesn't mean a neat ending. Life is messy, and your story can reflect this. Stories do not always end happily ever after for their characters, but you need to offer some resolution, even though it may not be a happy one. For example, in Lord of the Rings, Frodo has changed. Not only is he physically injured, but his outlook on life has changed totally. When he returns to the Shire, he is no longer satisfied with returning to his old life. He has been on too many epic adventures and he has seen a wider world out there. He yearns for more adventure and the Shire cannot provide him with this. This restlessness leads him to leave the Shire forever. In Wolf Hall, Henry has married Anne, but the pressure is on Anne to produce for him a male heir, or she too may be rejected. Also, Thomas may have been successful in arranging the divorce, but in the process has made many enemies, and it is highly likely that at some stage these enemies will seek revenge on him. So even by the conclusion of the story, his position is far from secure. By the end of the third stage, the denouement, some tensions may still remain. The crime detective story, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, offers a brilliant example of denouement where there is still many issues to be resolved even at the story's conclusion. Conclusion is different from a neat ending, and consider for yourselves the stories that you've read. Which ones felt the most satisfying at the end? Which ones did you find the most satisfying? The ones with neat and happy endings, or the ones with bittersweet endings, endings that were not entirely resolved? Which of these types of stories made you think about them and return to them for weeks after reading? And you're going to include various characters in your story. The characters will be those that assist your hero stroke protagonist in their journey, or those that block them in achieving their goals. There are many types of character. These are known as archetypes, stock characters. You will be familiar with many of them. Writers often use archetypes because your reader will quickly identify with them. Sometimes these archetypes are given different names in the theory of story writing. Also, some of these types merge into one. Sometimes they can be one type of character who then changes into another. And we'll look at some of the main archetypes for your story. A major archetype is the helper. The helper is a character who will assist your character on their journey. They will be very helpful and very loyal. However, they can't complete the quest or achieve the goal in the story. Only your protagonist can do this. A good example is Sam Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. Sam assists Frodo throughout the story, but it is only Frodo who can destroy the ring. The mentor is a character who guides and advises your protagonist. They will offer assistance and training to give them the skills to overcome the antagonist. For example, think of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or Yoda in Star Wars. The mentor usually appears at the first stage of your story. The giver or donor. This is a character that can be separate from the mentor. They give a gift or a crucial piece of information to the protagonist to help them along in their journey. They may appear in the first or second stage of the journey. The blocker is an antagonist who slows the protagonist's journey. They may not necessarily be the major obstacle, but can act as a delaying vehicle in your story. So think Gollum in Lord of the Rings. The false friend or false hero begins life in the story as a protagonist, helper or close ally. However, they will at some stage betray him or her. So think Cypher in The Matrix and Hans in Frozen. The villain is going to be a key antagonist in your story. So just think of the whole range of villains you've encountered in film, in literature, and in plays. So look at the story that you're writing. Can you identify some of your characters under those headings we've just described? Or do you think your story could benefit by including some of those archetypes in it? So I'm often asked, what books do I reference? What books have helped me in my writing? And I have a couple of suggestions, and I'll drop these as links below this video. Looking at plots and storylines, this is a brilliant book and has helped me because it breaks down some of those basic plots. And if you're looking for inspiration on structure and plot lines, this is a great book. And looking at the hero's journey and character types, I found that The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler is essential. It's essential reading. There's a lot to get through, but like all the books I'm recommending, they're great to dip into and refer to, with plenty of illustrations and great advice. So that's another one on my frontline bookshelf. Robert McKee's story is also great. It's on my frontline bookshelf. Not only is it great for writing stories and novels, it's also great if you're considering writing screenplays and plays generally. I've also found Christopher Booker's 7 Basic Plots essential reading. It's helped me so often. What it does, although it's a thick book, what it does, it explains clearly the origins of storytelling and how to tell stories really, really well. And although it is a thick book, Christopher Booker's style is entertaining. It's really interesting. He writes superbly well. So I would also recommend this book. Again, we're going to drop these in a link below. What I don't have here, because I have it on Amazon Kindle, as an Amazon Kindle book, is Into the Woods, which again is a shorter version, a condensed version, which contains lots of relevant information on structuring your story and plotting, and also the archetypal characters that can populate your story. So there's plenty of great books out there to check out. I don't intend them to be a distraction from your writing, that comes first, but they are great to dip into and reference, and I have found them essential in my journey as a writer. I hope you like this video. If so, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Also, if you have any suggestions for the content you'd like us to provide, please drop me a comment in the box below. Until next time, write well.